At a bustling carnival full of lights and laughter, a father's worst nightmare unfolds. His son vanishes without a trace. The only clue? A yellow pacifier near a fortune teller's booth. As the desperate search unfolds, 3 suspects emerge. The cryptic fortune teller with a dark past, a shady cotton candy vendor, and a nervous ticket taker with a guilty secret. Each seems plausible, but as secrets unravel and tensions rise, the truth is darker than anyone imagined. Who can be trusted when betrayal hides in plain sight? And what would you do if your son were taken and everyone around you acted suspicious? The traveling carnival unfurled like a bright, glittering web across the town's vacant lot, its blinking lights and dizzying music luring families, couples, and teenagers alike. Derek Moreno adjusted the strap of the baby carrier slung across his chest. His 2-year-old son, Owen, nestled inside. Owen's tiny fingers gripped a bright yellow pacifier as he gurgled happily, his brown eyes wide with wonder at the colorful chaos around them. The Ferris wheel spun lazily against the twilight sky, its lights shimmering like a distant constellation. Derek turned toward it, his mind briefly drifting. This night was supposed to be a break from the relentless loneliness since his wife had left, a chance to create a memory for himself and Owen, something normal in a life that had become anything but. Big, huh, buddy? Derek said, glancing down at Owen, who was pointing toward the glowing wheel. Big, Owen echoed, his voice a delighted squeak. As they walked toward the ride, Derek caught sight of a fortune teller's tent, draped in dark purple fabric with golden trim. A wooden sign outside read, Madame Elara, Seer of Truths. Come, discover what fate has in store, a lilting voice called from within. Derek smiled faintly and shook his head, continuing toward the wheel. He passed a cotton candy stand where a cheerful vendor called out, Cotton candy! Sweetest treat in the carnival! Here, little guy, want some? The man behind the stand, Rick, flashed a grin at Owen and winked at Derek. Derek hesitated. Maybe later, he replied, adjusting Owen's pacifier as the child squirmed. The Ferris wheel loomed closer, and Derek handed his ticket to a young woman standing by the entrance gate. The ticket taker, Lily, smiled warmly, but lingered a moment too long, her gaze fixed on Owen. He's adorable, she said. How old? 2, Derek replied, offering a polite smile. Lily's expression softened. My little brother's that age, she said, her voice tinged with something unspoken. Derek nodded and stepped toward the ride, but Owen twisted in his carrier, dropping his pacifier. Derek bent to retrieve it. When he straightened, his arms suddenly felt empty. Owen was gone. Derek's heart stopped. The crowd swirled around him like a tide, oblivious to his panic. Owen, he shouted, his voice cracking. He turned in circles, scanning faces, reaching out to strangers. Owen! The yellow pacifier lay on the ground near the fortune teller's tent. Derek lunged for it, his hand shaking as he picked it up. His gaze darted to the tent's entrance, its purple curtain swaying in the breeze. He barged inside. The air was thick with incense, and candles flickered on a low table where Madame Elara sat. She looked up, her dark eyes sharp and knowing. Have you seen my son? Derek demanded. He's 2, curly hair, he was right outside. Madame Elara's expression didn't change. She gestured to the empty chair across from her. Sit. I don't have time for this, Derek snapped. She leaned forward, her voice low. Time is not yours to control. Sit, and perhaps you'll find the answers you seek. Derek stormed out of the tent, anger and fear warring inside him. He scanned the midway, his pulse racing. He spotted Rick at the cotton candy stand, now idly cleaning the counter. Derek ran to him. Did you see him? Derek asked, gripping the edge of the counter. My son, he's missing. Rick's face twisted in confusion, then concern. The little guy you were carrying? No, I didn't see him go anywhere. I've been here the whole time. He scratched the back of his neck. You know, the ticket taker by the wheel? She seemed really interested in your kid earlier. Derek's mind reeled as he hurried back to Lily. She was still standing by the Ferris wheel, her smile gone when she saw his face. What's wrong? She asked, stepping toward him. My son, Derek said, his voice hoarse. He's missing. Someone said you were watching us earlier. Lily's face paled. No, I wasn't. She stopped herself, her eyes flickering with something Derek couldn't place. Wait, I did see a woman holding a little boy near the carousel. I thought it was her child, but now... Oh God, do you think... Where did she go? Derek demanded. Lily pointed toward the carousel, her hands trembling. That way. Derek ran toward the carousel, his heart pounding. The spinning horses blurred under the carnival lights, their painted grins grotesque in the night. He scanned the area, his voice breaking as he shouted Owen's name. Near the back of the ride, Derek spotted a small object lying on the ground. He crouched and picked it up. It was one of Owen's socks. A wave of nausea hit him. He turned, his eyes burning, as he tried to piece it all together. The fortune teller's cryptic calm, Rick's deflection, Lily's strange hesitation. None of it made sense. Someone had Owen. Someone here, in the carnival. The carnival's vibrant lights and cheerful music felt like mockery as Derek clutched Owen's sock in his trembling hands. His thoughts raced, desperation clawing at the edges of his sanity. He glanced back toward the midway where the suspects lingered in his mind like ghosts. Madame Elara, Rick, Lily. Each had acted strangely, their words and actions laced with half-truths or inconsistencies. Derek swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus. If I waste time pointing fingers without proof, I might never find him. He scanned the area near the carousel, searching for clues. The sock lay near a cluster of discarded food wrappers and trampled ticket stubs, but nothing else stood out. Then his eyes caught movement, a tall man in a dark jacket slipping through the shadows toward the game booths. Derek's pulse quickened. Derek sprinted back to the midway where Rick was wiping down his cotton candy machine. The vendor looked up, his face a mixture of unease and confusion. You again? Rick asked, setting down the rag. Did you find him? No, Derek snapped, his frustration boiling over. But you're going to tell me the truth now. You said you didn't see anything, but Lily thinks you might have been near the carousel earlier. Were you? Rick's eyes darted left and right before he leaned in, lowering his voice. All right, look. I saw a lady carrying a kid, but it didn't seem weird at first. Carnivals are full of kids, you know. She was heading toward the games, but then he hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. Then what? Derek pressed. Rick glanced around nervously. She handed something to the fortune teller. Could have been nothing, but it looked like a blanket or something bundled up. Derek's chest tightened. You're just now telling me this? I didn't think it mattered, man, Rick protested. I've got my own problems. And besides, that ticket taker's been acting weird all night. Maybe she knows more than she's saying. Fueled by Rick's words, Derek stormed back to Madame Elara's booth. The purple velvet curtains fluttered in the cool breeze, and the scent of incense hung thick in the air. Madame Elara was seated at her table, her hands folded neatly over a deck of tarot cards. You again, she said calmly, her dark eyes glinting in the candlelight. Have you come to learn what the fates have in store? Cut the act, Derek growled, slamming his hand on the table. Rick says you were handed something near the carousel. What was it? Madame Elara's expression didn't falter. She tilted her head slightly, her silver earrings catching the light. What I was given is of no concern to you. Like hell it's not, Derek shouted. My son is missing and I'm done playing games. She leaned back, a faint smile curving her lips. What you seek, Derek, is closer than you think. But be careful where you look. Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who deceive you. The cryptic remark hit him like a slap. What does that mean? Are you saying Rick or Lily? She held up a hand, silencing him. I'm saying only what the cards have shown me. It is up to you to see the truth. Derek left the booth, his head spinning. His gut told him Madame Elara knew more than she was letting on, but her words about trust rattled him. He found Lily near the Ferris wheel, pacing nervously. Her face lit up with hope when she saw him, but it faded as she registered his expression. Did you find him? She asked, her voice trembling. No, Derek said tightly, but I've been getting a lot of conflicting stories. Rick says you were acting strange earlier. Care to explain? Lily's cheeks flushed, and she looked away. I wasn't acting strange, she muttered. I don't know. I saw something that didn't sit right with me. What? Derek demanded. What did you see? She hesitated, then said, I saw Rick talking to Madame Elara earlier near the carousel. It looked heated. I didn't hear what they were saying, but they both seemed tense. Derek frowned. Rick says he saw a woman carrying something near the carousel. Said she handed it to Madame Elara. Did you see that? Lily bit her lip, her eyes darting away. No, but he could be lying. He's always cutting corners, pocketing cash. He'd throw anyone under the bus to save himself. Derek stepped back, his mind swirling with possibilities. Every conversation seemed to add a new layer to the mystery. Rick, Madame Elara, Lily, they were all connected somehow, but who was lying, and why? He looked down at the yellow pacifier in his hand, its bright color stark against the night. It was the only tangible clue he had. Clutching it tightly, he turned back toward the midway. If Owen was still here, he'd find him, and if someone had taken him, they wouldn't get away with it. Derek walked back toward the midway, his mind tangled in a web of uncertainty. 3 suspects, 3 stories, 3 motives that might explain why his son was missing. Each thread seemed plausible, yet none led directly to Owen. He couldn't shake the feeling that every clue, every conversation was pointing him in multiple directions on purpose, designed to confuse him. The faint sound of carnival music and the chatter of a thinning crowd reminded him that time was slipping away. He forced himself to focus. Someone knows where Owen is. Someone is lying. Rick was still at his stand, but now his movements were hurried, as if he were preparing to leave. Derek approached, his footsteps purposeful. Rick froze, his face a mix of guilt and irritation. "You're back," Rick said. "Look, I told you everything I know." "Not everything," Derek shot back. "Lily says you were arguing with Madame Elara earlier near the carousel. What was that about?" Rick stiffened. "She told you that?" "Figures. She's just trying to pin this on me." "Why would she do that?" Derek pressed. "What are you hiding?" Rick hesitated, then leaned in, lowering his voice. "Fine. You want the truth? I owed her money. Madame Elara runs this whole racket behind the scenes. She loans cash to workers like me when times are tight, but she's a real shark about it. I didn't pay her back fast enough, so yeah, we argued, but I swear I didn't take your kid." Derek studied Rick's face, searching for cracks in his story. "What about the woman you saw near the carousel? The one you said handed something to Madame Elara?" "I wasn't lying about that," Rick insisted. "I didn't see her face, but it looked like she was carrying a kid. Maybe it was your son. I don't know." Derek's frustration flared. "You didn't think that was worth mentioning sooner?" Rick looked genuinely defensive. "I didn't think it was connected. People hand stuff to Madame Elara all the time. Money, trinkets, junk they think is cursed or whatever. How was I supposed to know?" Derek stepped back, his mind racing. Rick's story added another layer to the puzzle, but it didn't bring him closer to Owen. He needed more. Lily was pacing near the Ferris wheel again, her hands twisting nervously. Derek approached and she froze, her expression wary. "Did you talk to Rick?" she asked. "What did he say?" Derek crossed his arms. "He says he owes Madame Elara money and that you're trying to shift suspicion onto him. Care to explain why he thinks that?" Lily's face flushed. "Because he's a liar, that's why. He's always up to something shady. If you ask me, he's trying to cover his tracks." Derek narrowed his eyes. "What about you? You seem awfully nervous for someone who says they don't know anything." Lily hesitated, then sighed. "All right, fine. I wasn't completely honest with you earlier. I was fired from my last job because I didn't report something I should have. A parent was mistreating their kid and I froze. I didn't know what to do." Her voice cracked and she looked away. "That's why I was watching your son earlier. I wanted to make sure he was safe. When he disappeared, I felt like it was my fault." Her words carried the weight of guilt, but Derek couldn't tell if it was genuine or rehearsed. He studied her carefully. "And what about Madame Elara? Rick says you saw her with someone near the carousel." Lily nodded reluctantly. "I did. It was a man, tall, wearing a dark jacket. I couldn't see his face, but they were whispering, like they didn't want anyone to hear. He handed her something and she slipped it into her bag." Derek returned to Madame Elara's booth, his anger simmering beneath the surface. The fortune teller greeted him with her usual calm demeanor, but this time he didn't give her a chance to speak. "Enough with the riddles," Derek said sharply. "Rick says you're running some kind of loan shark operation, and Lily says you were handed something near the carousel. What are you hiding?" Madame Elara's dark eyes flickered with something unreadable. "They say the truth sets one free, yet here you are, shackled by their lies." "Stop deflecting," Derek snapped. "I know you were handed something near the carousel. What was it?" She leaned back, her lips curving into a faint smile. "You are persistent, Derek, but persistence without direction is folly. I don't have time for this," he growled. "If you know anything about my son, you'd better tell me now." Madame Elara held his gaze, her tone suddenly serious. "And if the truth leads you to someone you trust, someone you think is innocent?" Her words sent a chill through him. "What does that mean?" She gestured toward the cards on the table. "The cards hold the answers, if you're brave enough to look." Derek hesitated, then shook his head. "You're not going to distract me with your games. If you're involved in this, I'll find out." He stormed out of the tent, his thoughts swirling. Madame Elara's cryptic warnings only deepened the mystery, making him question everything he thought he knew about the people around him. As Derek walked through the midway, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out and stared at the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. "Look behind the Ferris wheel. You'll find what you're looking for." Derek's heart raced as he hurried toward the towering ride. The shadows behind the Ferris wheel stretched long and dark, and the air grew colder as he approached. His breath caught when he saw a small bundle on the ground. He rushed forward, pulling back the cloth to reveal another doll. Pinned to the doll was a note scrawled in jagged handwriting. "Who do you trust?" Derek's pulse thundered in his ears. The question hung in the air like a noose, tightening around him. Rick? Lily? Madame Elara? Someone was playing a game, and Derek was running out of time to figure out who. Derek stared at the note pinned to the doll. "Who do you trust?" Its jagged letters mocking him. The carnival lights behind the Ferris wheel flickered, the music fading to a sinister hum in his ears. Every step he'd taken so far had only deepened the mystery, making everyone around him seem like both a potential ally and a threat. The doll's hollow eyes seemed to accuse him. "Do you trust too much? Or too little?" Derek stormed back to the cotton candy stand, gripping the note tightly. Rick was gone, but the stand's counter was cluttered with bags of half-spun candy and a small stack of crumpled bills. A young boy stood nearby, licking a lollipop. "Where's the cotton candy guy?" Derek demanded. The boy shrugged. "He left a little bit ago. Said something about packing up." Derek clenched his jaw and turned toward the storage area near the back of the carnival. If Rick was gone, he'd gone there. He marched through the thinning crowd, his steps fueled by frustration and dread. The storage trailers loomed ahead, casting long shadows under the dim carnival lights. As Derek approached, he spotted Rick hunched over a small bag, hastily stuffing it with supplies. He froze when he saw Derek. "Leaving in a hurry?" Derek asked, his voice low and dangerous. Rick straightened, his face pale. "What do you want now?" Derek held up the note. "You tell me." "Who sent this?" Rick frowned, his brow furrowing. "I don't know anything about a note." "Cut the lies," Derek snapped. "You've been deflecting all night. First you don't see anything. Then you're suddenly a witness. Now you're running?" Rick raised his hands defensively. "I told you the truth. I owed Madame Elara money, and yeah, I saw her with someone near the carousel. But I didn't take your kid. Why would I?" Derek stepped closer, his voice sharp. "Maybe because you're desperate. Maybe you thought you could use Owen to pay off your debt." Rick's face darkened. "That's not fair, man. I've got my problems, sure, but I'd never hurt a kid." Derek studied him, his anger simmering. Rick's fear seemed real, but that didn't make him innocent. Derek's gut told him Rick was hiding something, but what? Derek left Rick and headed back toward the midway. Lily was near the Ferris wheel again, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as she paced. When she saw him, her eyes widened. "You found something, didn't you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Derek didn't answer immediately. He held up the note. "This was pinned to a doll behind the Ferris wheel. What do you know about it?" Lily's face paled and she shook her head. "I don't know anything about a note." "Don't lie to me," Derek said coldly. "Rick says he saw you watching him earlier. He says you've been acting strange all night." "I've been acting strange?" Lily said, her voice rising. "He's the one sneaking around and pocketing cash. And what about Madame Elara? She's been creeping me out since I started working here." Derek's frustration boiled over. "Why should I trust you? You admitted you've frozen when kids were in danger before." Lily's face twisted with guilt, but then her expression hardened. "You don't know what that was like," she said, her voice shaking. "I made a mistake, and I've paid for it every day since. But I swear, I'm trying to do the right thing now." "Then help me find Owen," Derek said. "No more half-truths, no more deflection." Lily hesitated, then said quietly, "There's a rumor about Madame Elara. People say she's not just a fortune teller, she's involved in things, bad things. I've seen her talking to men who don't look like carnival workers. If Owen's gone, I'd bet anything she knows why." Derek stormed toward Madame Elara's booth, his mind racing. If she was involved in something bigger, something criminal, Owen could already be in danger. The fortune teller's calm, cryptic demeanor only fueled his anger. Inside the booth, Madame Elara sat at her table, shuffling her cards. She looked up as Derek entered, her expression unreadable. "You've returned," she said smoothly. "Have the cards led you back to me?" "No more games," Derek snarled. He slammed the note onto the table. "What is this? Who sent it?" She studied the note for a moment, then looked up, her dark eyes narrowing. "You're running out of time." Derek leaned closer, his voice low and furious. "You know something? Where is my son?" Madame Elara tilted her head, her earrings catching the candlelight. "Your son is closer than you think, but finding him will require more than anger." Derek's patience snapped. He grabbed her arm, his voice rising. "Tell me where he is, or I swear—" She met his gaze evenly, her voice calm. "You're asking the wrong questions, Derek. The truth isn't what you think it is." Derek released her, his frustration boiling over. Her cryptic answers felt like another cruel distraction, but her calmness unnerved him. Was she taunting him or warning him? As Derek left the booth, his phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number appeared. "Go to the carousel. Time is almost up." Derek's heart pounded as he sprinted toward the carousel, Lily close behind. The ride stood still now, its painted horses gleaming under the carnival lights. The shadows seemed darker here, heavier, as if the air itself carried secrets. "Do you see anything?" Lily whispered. Derek scanned the area, his eyes darting from the ticket booth to the ride's control box. Then he saw it. A small flash of yellow tucked under the edge of the carousel platform. He dropped to his knees and pulled it out. It was Owen's other sock. Lily knelt beside him, her voice barely a whisper. "He's here." Derek's jaw tightened as he rose to his feet. Someone had been leading him in circles all night, dropping clues like breadcrumbs. "This has to end," Derek said. "And whoever's behind it isn't leaving this carnival." Somewhere nearby, Owen was waiting, and someone still had all the answers. Derek clutched Owen's sock in his hand, his knuckles whitening as the tension coursed through his body. The carousel loomed above him, its once innocent painted horses now seeming to sneer, their bright smiles mocking his desperation. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the faint hum of a nearby generator. "This is deliberate," he muttered, his voice low but taut. "Someone's been leading me around all night, dropping just enough to keep me on the hook." Lily stood beside him, her arms wrapped around herself. "Whoever it is, they want you to stay in the game." "They're not hiding, they're playing." Derek's gaze shifted to the shadows near the carousel's control box. His instincts prickled. "Stay here," he said. Without waiting for her reply, he moved toward the box, his breath shallow. He crouched and peered beneath the platform, half expecting to find another note or toy planted there to taunt him. Instead, he found an empty bag, a tattered carnival worker's duffel with its zipper half open. Inside were a pair of gloves and a flashlight. The gloves were smeared with a faint reddish stain. His heart sank as he examined them closer. Paint, maybe? Or something worse? He heard a faint rustle behind him and turned sharply, his body tense. But it was only Lily, standing nervously at the edge of the platform. "What did you find?" she asked, her voice trembling. "A worker's bag," Derek said. "Could belong to Rick, could belong to anyone." Lily stepped closer, frowning as she stared at the bag. "I've seen him with one like that. He carries it everywhere." Derek's frustration surged. If Rick's involved in this, why hasn't he run by now? He's still here. "Maybe he's stuck," Lily suggested. "Or maybe—" Her voice trailed off, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. "Maybe what?" Derek pressed, his eyes narrowing. "Maybe it's not him," she said. "I mean, think about it. Why would he be so obvious? It feels like someone's setting him up." Derek's mind churned. Lily's hesitation seemed genuine, but the inconsistency gnawed at him. Was she defending Rick because she believed him, or because she needed me to? Derek looked back at the carousel. Something about the area still felt wrong, like it was hiding more than just the sock he'd found. He stood and moved toward the ride, stepping carefully onto the platform. The painted horses towered over him, their once whimsical designs now casting long, unsettling shadows. "Lily," he said, his voice low, "I need you to tell me everything you know about Madame Elara." Lily hesitated. "I've told you. She's shady. I've seen her with people who don't belong here, and she's always whispering, like she doesn't want anyone to overhear." "But what does she gain from this?" Derek demanded. "If she's behind it, why leave clues? Why not just take Owen and disappear?" "I don't know," Lily admitted, her voice cracking. "But she's smart, smarter than any of us. If she's involved, it's for a reason." Derek's frustration mounted. Every answer only deepened the mystery, and every lead seemed to spiral back into the same tangle of suspects. Rick, Lily, Madame Elara, each had secrets, each had motives, and yet none of it made sense. The generator's hum grew louder as Derek moved around the carousel. His senses heightened. His foot hit something small and metallic. He crouched and picked it up. A key, its surface worn and scratched. "What's that?" Lily asked, stepping closer. "A key," Derek said, turning it over in his hand. It was stamped with a number, 32. Lily's eyes widened. "That's for one of the storage lockers." Derek felt a jolt of adrenaline. "Where?" "Behind the Ferris wheel," she said. "The workers use them for their personal stuff. But if someone left this here—" Her voice trailed off as they exchanged a glance. Neither needed to say it aloud. The locker could be a trap, or it could be where Owen was being kept. Derek pocketed the key and motioned for Lily to follow him. Together, they moved quickly but cautiously through the thinning carnival grounds, their shadows flickering under the dim lights. When they reached the lockers, Derek scanned the rows until he found 32. His hands shook as he slid the key into the lock and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a small, cluttered space. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable. Clothes, an old backpack, a half-empty water bottle. But then he saw it, a bright yellow pacifier sitting on top of a folded jacket. His breath caught. He grabbed the pacifier and turned to Lily. "This is his." Before she could respond, a voice cut through the silence behind them. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Derek froze, the pacifier clutched in his hand. He turned slowly, his heart pounding. Madame Elara stood a few feet away, her dark eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You've been very busy tonight," she said, her tone calm but edged with something sharp. "But you've been asking the wrong questions." Derek stepped forward, his voice low and furious. "Where is my son?" Madame Elara's lips curved into a faint smile. "Closer than you think." Before Derek could respond, Lily's voice cut through the tension. "Why are you here? What do you want?" Madame Elara's gaze shifted to Lily, her expression unreadable. "The truth has always been right in front of you, but you've been too blind to see it." Derek clenched his fists. "Enough with the riddles. If you know where he is, tell me." Madame Elara tilted her head, her earrings catching the light. "You still don't understand, do you? The people you trust the most are the ones who betray you." Her words hung in the air like a curse, and Derek's mind raced. Was she talking about Rick? Or Lily? Or someone else? The pieces of the puzzle were closing in, but the picture they painted was more terrifying than anything Derek had imagined. Derek felt a heavy chill settle over him as Madame Elara's words echoed in his mind. "The people you trust the most are the ones who betray you." Her cryptic statements had always unsettled him, but now they felt like razor-sharp clues slicing through the fog of confusion. His eyes shifted to Lily, who stood a step behind him, her face pale and unreadable. He thought of her nervous behavior, her vague explanations, her insistence that Madame Elara was to blame. Then his mind flicked to Rick, who seemed desperate to clear his own name, yet always seemed to know just enough to keep suspicion circling back around him. And now Madame Elara, standing before him, calm as a still pond in a storm, was daring him to unravel the truth. "Why don't you just say it?" Derek snapped. "You're toying with me because you already know what's going on." Madame Elara stepped closer, her expression unchanging. "I know many things, but the truth is not mine to reveal. It is yours to uncover." Her words made his blood boil. "I don't care about riddles. My son is out there and I— Perhaps you should stop looking outward, she interrupted, her voice like a whip. Perhaps the answers lie within. Derek's jaw tightened. Enough. He stepped toward her, towering over her small frame. Where is he? Madame Elara didn't flinch. You're running out of time. The carnival is winding down. The curtain will soon fall. And then it will be too late. Derek turned sharply away from her, his pulse pounding in his ears. Lily stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. She's trying to mess with your head. Maybe, Derek muttered. Or maybe she's trying to tell us something we don't want to hear. Lily's brow furrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Derek didn't answer. Instead, he pulled the pacifier from his pocket, staring at it as if it might give him the answers he so desperately needed. His mind replayed every interaction he'd had tonight, every clue, every word. Who's lying and why? The storage locker, the key, the pacifier. They were all planted, deliberately placed for him to find. Someone had been watching him. Someone who knew Owen's every detail, from the color of his socks to the pacifier he carried. Where's Rick? Derek asked suddenly. Lily blinked. What? Rick? He was packing up his things earlier, wasn't he? Where is he now? Lily hesitated. I don't know. He said he was leaving. Derek's jaw tightened. Convenient. He knows this place better than anyone. If someone needed a way to keep a child hidden, he'd know how to do it. Lily stepped closer, her voice soft but insistent. You don't really think it's him, do you? I mean, he's a jerk, sure, but this? Derek turned to her, his eyes narrowing. Do you have a better theory? Her gaze faltered. No, I don't know. I keep thinking about Madame Elara. What she said about betrayal. And what about you? Derek said suddenly, his voice sharp. You've been involved from the start. You were watching us at the Ferris wheel. You saw someone near the carousel. You told me about Madame Elara. How do I know you're not the one trying to cover your tracks? Lily's eyes widened. What? You think No, I've been trying to help you. Derek stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. You've been steering me in circles all night. If this is some kind of game, I'm done playing. Tears welled in Lily's eyes and her voice trembled. I swear I didn't take him. I wouldn't. The sound of shuffling footsteps broke the tense silence. Derek turned sharply, his fists clenched. From the shadows near the storage lockers, Rick emerged, his face tense and unreadable. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets, his gaze flicking between Derek and Lily. What's going on here? Rick asked cautiously. You tell me, Derek said, stepping forward. Where have you been? Rick frowned. Packing up. Figured I should stay out of your way since you've been accusing me of everything under the sun. Derek held up the pacifier. And yet, this shows up near the lockers, near your stuff. Rick's expression darkened. I didn't put that there. Someone's setting me up. That's convenient, Derek shot back. Rick's jaw tightened. Believe what you want, man, but you're barking up the wrong tree. Am I? Derek pressed. Because everything about this, everything, keeps pointing back to you. Or maybe, Rick said, his voice rising, it's pointing to someone who's been with you this whole time. Derek froze. What's that supposed to mean? Rick gestured toward Lily, his eyes narrowing. You ever stop to wonder why she's been so eager to help? Why she's been feeding you all these theories about me and Madame Elara? That's not true, Lily cried, her voice breaking. I've been trying to help him find his son. Or cover your tracks, Rick retorted. You've been planting clues, haven't you? Leading him in circles while you figure out your next move. Derek's mind spun. Rick's accusations felt plausible, but Lily's distress seemed genuine. He turned back to Madame Elara, who stood silently, watching the scene unfold like a detached observer. What do you know? Derek demanded. Tell me the truth. Madame Elara's lips curved into a faint smile. The truth will reveal itself when you're ready to see it. Derek clenched his fists. He was close, so close, but the pieces refused to fit. All he could do was keep pushing forward. Somewhere in this tangled web of lies, the answer was waiting, and so was Owen. The tension between Derek, Rick, and Lily hung in the air like a storm about to break. Every breath felt charged, every word a potential explosion. The faint hum of the carnival's final rides and the distant murmur of the thinning crowd were the only sounds beyond the beating of Derek's heart. Enough, Derek said, his voice slicing through the chaos. "Someone here knows where Owen is, and I'm not leaving until I find out who." Rick crossed his arms, his jaw clenched. "You keep pointing fingers, man, but you're chasing shadows. Maybe you should ask yourself who's been leading you around all night." "That's exactly what I'm doing," Derek shot back. His eyes darted between Rick, Lily, and the ever-present, unreadable Madame Elara. "No more games. One of you took him." "I didn't take your kid!" Rick's voice rose, frustration and anger breaking through. "I've been honest about everything. Yeah, I've got my problems. But hurting a kid? That's not me." Lily's voice cracked as she spoke. "And I've done nothing but try to help. You think I'd go through all this just to cover my tracks? If I wanted to hide something, I wouldn't have stayed." Derek's gaze turned to Madame Elara. "And you? You know more than you're letting on. You've been cryptic all night. Why? What are you hiding?" She tilted her head slightly, her dark eyes glinting. "I have hidden nothing. The truth has been before you all along, but you've been blind to it." Her words struck Derek like a whip, their weight sinking deep into his gut. His mind churned, replaying every interaction, every clue, every moment. He thought of Rick, whose actions screamed desperation. The money he skimmed, the argument with Madame Elara, his frantic attempt to pack up and leave. But Rick's anger seemed rooted in self-preservation, not malice. If he was guilty, why would he stay? And why would he point fingers at Lily if he knew Derek would see through it? Then there was Lily, who had been there from the start. Her nervousness, her evasiveness, the moments when her stories didn't quite line up. She had steered him toward Rick and Madame Elara, always shifting the focus away from herself. But her panic felt genuine, too raw to fake. Finally, Madame Elara, who thrived on her enigmatic presence. Her calm, knowing demeanor, her cryptic warnings, and her subtle manipulation of every conversation. But was she orchestrating everything, or merely observing, pulling strings without getting her hands dirty? The silence stretched as Derek's thoughts whirled. His grip tightened around Owen's pacifier, the small, tangible piece of his son grounding him. Then it clicked. A memory surfaced, sharp and clear. When he first approached the Ferris wheel, Owen had dropped his pacifier. The moment had seemed insignificant, a child's small, fleeting action, but now it felt like a key. The pacifier was picked up and planted later. Someone had been watching closely enough to take it. Someone close. His eyes snapped to Lily. "You were there when he dropped this," Derek said, his voice quiet but firm. "You were the only one close enough to pick it up." Lily's face paled. "What are you talking about? I didn't—" "You said you wanted to help," Derek interrupted, his voice rising. "But every clue has led me nowhere. Every time I got close, something pulled me back into the maze, and you were always there, always steering me." Tears welled in Lily's eyes, and she shook her head. "You're wrong. I swear I didn't take him. I just wanted to help." Derek stepped closer, his fury barely contained. "Then why did Madame Elara warn me about betrayal? Why did Rick accuse you of planting clues? Why does everything point back to you?" "I didn't—" Lily's voice broke, and she took a step back. "I didn't mean for it to happen." The confession hit Derek like a punch to the gut. "What?" Lily collapsed onto her knees, her hands shaking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted to scare you, make you see how dangerous it is to be careless. I didn't know someone else would take him." "What are you talking about?" Derek demanded, his voice a mixture of fury and disbelief. "I saw him drop the pacifier," Lily sobbed. "I picked it up. I thought I could, I don't know, leave it somewhere to make you think about watching him more carefully. But when I turned around, he was gone. Someone else took him." The weight of her words sank in, and Derek felt like the ground beneath him had disappeared. You let someone take him?" Lily's sobs turned into gasps. "I didn't know what to do. I thought I could fix it, lead you to him, but it got out of control. I don't know who took him, I swear." Madame Elara stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "The truth is revealed, but the journey is not over. The child is still here. The one who took him is closer than you realize." Derek's head snapped toward her. "You know who it is." "I have only observed," Madame Elara said. "But the truth is now within your grasp, if you are willing to see it." Derek's gaze narrowed, closer than I realize. The final piece of the puzzle hovered just out of reach. Then, like a bolt of lightning, it struck Rick. The duffel bag with red stain, the flashlight, the lies, and the deflections. It all pointed back to him. Derek turned sharply, his fury renewed. "Where is he?" Derek shouted. "Tell me where my son is!" Rick's face contorted, and for a moment he seemed ready to fight. Then his shoulders slumped, and he let out a shaky breath. "Fine," Rick muttered. "I'll take you to him." Rick led Derek and Lily toward a trailer at the far end of the carnival. Derek's heart pounded with every step, dread and hope warring within him. Rick opened the door, revealing a dimly lit space. In the corner, huddled under a blanket, was Owen. "Owen!" Derek cried, rushing forward. He scooped the boy into his arms, tears streaming down his face as relief washed over him. Owen clung to him, his small body trembling. "I didn't hurt him," Rick said quickly, his voice shaky. I thought I could hold on to him for a while, teach you a lesson about watching him more closely. I never meant for it to go this far." Derek turned, his eyes blazing with anger. "You used my son to teach me a lesson? Do you have any idea?" "You don't understand," Rick interrupted. "I saw what happened with her." He pointed at Lily. "She wasn't watching him, and someone else almost took him before I did. I thought I was saving him." Derek's fury boiled over. "You're both to blame. You used my son like he was nothing. But he's not nothing. He's my everything." Rick fell silent, his gaze dropping. The police arrived minutes later, called by Carnival security after the commotion. Derek handed over Rick and Lily's confessions, ensuring they'd face justice. Holding Owen tightly, Derek walked away from the carnival, his heart heavy but his resolve unbroken. The night's darkness had revealed the true cost of misplaced trust, but also the depth of a father's love. Derek carried Owen through the quiet streets as the carnival lights faded into the distance, the adrenaline in his veins giving way to exhaustion. His son clung to him, his tiny fingers wrapped tightly around the fabric of Derek's shirt. Every breath Owen took was a reminder that Derek had gotten him back, but the ordeal still weighed heavily on his shoulders. Lily and Rick had been taken into custody by the police. Their stories, though riddled with guilt and excuses, pointed to one unshakable truth. They had both acted selfishly and recklessly, putting Owen in danger. Yet it was still unclear who had ultimately orchestrated the chaos that unfolded that night. Madame Elara had vanished before the authorities arrived, her tent left empty, her cards scattered across the table. Derek couldn't decide if she'd been a manipulative bystander or someone who had played a calculated role in the events. Her cryptic warnings lingered in his mind like a distant echo. As he reached his car, Derek strapped Owen into his seat, the boy's wide eyes reflecting both fear and relief. Derek knelt beside him, his voice soft but firm. "You're safe now, buddy. I promise." Owen blinked, his pacifier back in his mouth, and Derek's heart ached. He had come so close to losing everything. The thought of the night's horrors haunted him, but Owen's presence grounded him, reminding him of what truly mattered. Later that night, Derek sat at the kitchen table, Owen fast asleep in his bed. The house was silent, except for the rhythmic ticking of the clock. Derek stared at the pieces of evidence he'd kept, the yellow pacifier, the crumpled notes, and the photographs the police had taken of the locker and the trailer. The question burned in his mind. Was it truly over? Lily's sobbing confession had painted her as guilty but not malicious. Rick's cowardly explanations reeked of self-interest, but his actions hadn't been entirely devoid of care. Then there was the shadowy figure of Madame Elara, an enigma who seemed to have orchestrated so much yet left no trace behind. Derek leaned back, his exhaustion finally catching up with him. The people I trusted betrayed me. But why do I feel like there's still more to this? In the weeks that followed, the carnival was shut down, its operations investigated thoroughly. Authorities discovered that Madame Elara had been using the carnival as a front for illegal activities, trafficking stolen goods and laundering money. Rick's debts had tied him to her, and Lily's desperation to prove herself had made her an unwitting pawn in a larger game. But Owen's disappearance wasn't part of Madame Elara's grand scheme. That had been a cruel confluence of selfish choices, accidents, and fear. The fortune-teller's cryptic involvement left Derek questioning how much she'd truly known and how much she'd manipulated. Derek didn't seek closure from the people involved. Instead, He focused on Owen, determined to rebuild the sense of safety that had been shattered. Every laugh, every hug, and every bedtime story became a testament to their survival and resilience. One night, weeks after the carnival, Derek received an unmarked envelope in the mail. Inside was a single tarot card, the Fool. Beneath it was a note, scrawled in elegant handwriting. Trust is a fragile thing, but so is fear. The lessons we learn shape us, but the love we hold binds us. Never forget, even in the darkness, light finds its way home. Derek stared at the note, his emotions swirling. He didn't know what Madame Elara's final message meant, or if it was even from her. But he knew one thing: Owen was safe, and they had each other. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to HeroKind Stories for more gripping tales of love, loss, and triumph. Share this story with someone who would love an emotional journey, and leave a comment to let us know your thoughts. Your feedback inspires the stories we create.